To really understand the war in Ukraine, you have to look way beyond the front lines. You see, this conflict isn't just being fought with tanks and drones. No, it's also being fought with words, with new alliances, and with huge strategies that are literally redrawing the map of global power. So, let's peel back those layers together.
Okay, so the first layer, it starts right here. This is Russia's official justification for the invasion, laid out by Vladimir Putin on day one. Now, the words you really got to focus on here are demilitarize and denazify. These weren't just throwaway terms, they were the stated goals, and they became the foundation for a much, much bigger campaign.
Because that official justification, it's really just the tip of the iceberg in what is a massive information war. This isn't just about military strategy, it's a full-on battle for hearts and minds, and it's being fought with these carefully crafted stories designed to make actions seem legitimate and to paint the other side as the villain. So let's start with that first term, denazification. A study by the Rand Corporation basically calls this a manufactured narrative. But it's more than just a word, it's a strategic weapon. By bringing up the idea of Nazism, Russia was trying to tap into these really deep historical fears and memories, casting the invasion not as an act of aggression, but as this righteous struggle against an old, familiar evil. And what's really interesting is how this whole thing evolved. Researchers found a second, and frankly, much more toxic narrative running right alongside the first one. This one went beyond just political name-calling and started to dehumanize Ukrainians as a whole group. The goal here is pretty chilling. It's to use language that strips people of their humanity, creates a sense of disgust, and ultimately makes violence seem not just acceptable, but necessary. And wow, this just perfectly illustrates that point. This isn't some random comment from the internet. This is from Dmitry Medvedev, the former president of Russia. I mean, just listen to the words: cockroaches, insectarium. This is a textbook example of that dehumanizing language we were just talking about, and it's being used at the highest levels to paint an entire group of people as subhuman pests. And this kind of talk didn't just stay in speeches. It absolutely flooded the internet. The data is just staggering. Take a look at this chart. Before the invasion, online posts pushing these narratives were pretty much zero. Afterwards, they exploded to over 300,000 per day. A spike of this size, it just doesn't happen organically. It's the clear signature of a coordinated, well-funded information attack.
So it's really important to get that this language has a specific job to do. Researchers have kind of identified a 4-part playbook for making violence seem okay. First, you dehumanize the enemy. Then you demonize them, paint them as purely evil. Next, you frame the whole thing as an existential us or them fight for survival. And finally, you portray them as totally immoral. You put all those steps together and you have a system designed to just dismantle our natural human reluctance to harm other people.
Okay, let's shift gears. Let's move to the next layer and see how all this builds. This war of words and narratives, it doesn't exist in a bubble. It's being backed up by very real, very tangible support from international allies. The conflict has pulled in other global powers, forging new alliances and creating supply chains for the actual physical battlefield. Let's just take Iran's involvement, for example. This timeline shows a really clear and rapid escalation of support. It started with some reports of smuggled weapons just a few months into the war. By July, U.S. intelligence was warning about drone transfers. Then, by October, those drones were actually being used against Ukrainian cities. And by November, the concern had moved on to even more powerful ballistic missiles. It's just a clear pattern of deepening military cooperation. Publicly, though, the story was totally different. In October 2022, right when its drones were showing up over Ukraine, the Iranian Foreign Ministry issued a flat denial. They said they were not supplying Russia with weapons for the war. And this created this direct clash between what they were saying and what the evidence on the battlefield was showing. And that's where the geopolitical tension just shot through the roof. The US, the UK, and France all accused Iran of violating a UN Security Council resolution that limits its weapons transfers. Then, intelligence reports actually placed Iranian personnel on the ground in Crimea, helping operate the drones. And on top of that, there was evidence that Iran was even planning to help Russia build its own drone factory. So, on one side, you have a flat denial, and on the other, a growing mountain of evidence saying the exact opposite. All right, now let's flip the chessboard and look at the other side of this. The invasion didn't just forge new alliances for Russia, it forced this absolutely massive, fundamental reshaping of the NATO alliance. The war basically triggered a strategic pivot that has redefined European security for a generation.
And nothing captures that pivot more clearly than this statement. In its 2022 strategic concept, NATO declared Russia the most significant and direct threat. The language is just so direct. It marks the official end of any post-Cold War idea that Russia could be a partner. The entire framework has shifted from cooperation to confrontation.
And of course, a new strategy like that, well, it comes with a price tag. That 2% target, the idea that every member should spend at least 2% of their economy on defense, suddenly went from being a soft guideline to a hard and fast rule. It became the #1 way for allies to show they were serious about defending each other. But what's really fascinating is the debate this has kicked off within Europe. According to one analysis, two competing visions have sort of emerged. One side argues for an eventual security with Russia, basically saying that you can't have lasting peace without some kind of dialogue. The other side argues for security against Russia, saying that a Russian defeat is an absolute must-have for future stability. This is the core strategic puzzle facing the continent, a fundamental clash of ideas that is going to define Europe's future for decades. And you can already see how that security against Russia model is turning into real action. Just look at Germany's new pledges. We're talking about a full tank division ready by 2025, a permanent brigade of 5,000 soldiers stationed in Lithuania, and a total of 35,000 soldiers for NATO's rapid response forces. I mean, these are huge, concrete military commitments that show this new strategic reality is here to stay. So we've peeled back the layers, from the war of words to the new alliances and this huge pivot in Western strategy. All of this brings us to the core question, right? What are the ultimate consequences of all these shifts? What happens next? So here's the most important takeaway. This is no longer just a war in Ukraine. It has become the catalyst for a total shakeup of global security. The old rules, the old assumptions about how the world works, all of that is being rewritten right now in real time, both on the battlefield and in the halls of power. And this leaves us with one last big thought. We're watching old alliances like NATO get stronger and new ones form, like the deepening ties between Russia and Iran. As these different blocs solidify and the lines get drawn more clearly, you just have to ask yourself, are we walking into a new and prolonged era of global confrontation? Is this just the new normal?